The morning was just breaking when Joaquim, a man in his early 60s, woke to the first crow of the rooster on his small property in the countryside of Paraná. His face bore the marks of years spent under the sun, and his hands were roughened by decades of working the land. He put on his worn shirt, placed a straw hat on his head, and stepped out to tend to the cows before facing what would be one of the most unusual days of his life. That day, Joaquim was nervous but determined. He had never been to the big city, and his old pickup truck, which had seen better days decades ago, seemed ready to quit with every mile. Inside the vehicle was a battered briefcase containing important papers that symbolized years of savings, harvest sales, and a bit of luck. Joaquim had decided it was time to replace his tired truck with something more reliable. It was an important investment for his farm, but there was another, more personal reason behind his decision. As he entered the city, he was struck by the hustle and bustle. The number of cars and towering buildings made him feel small, but he didn't let that faze him. The borrowed GPS guided him to a well-known luxury car dealership where Joaquim planned to make his purchase. When he finally arrived, he parked his old truck discreetly in a corner of the lot, feeling the weight of curious eyes on the rusting vehicle. Inside the dealership, the contrast was staggering. The polished marble floor gleamed, the cars were like jewels on display, and the air conditioning kept the temperature perfectly regulated. The impeccably dressed salesman walked through the showroom, their controlled smiles barely masking their appraisals of each customer. When Joaquim entered, his humble appearance and simple clothes immediately drew attention. One salesman whispered something to his colleague, who smirked while adjusting his tie. Unaware of the remarks, Joaquim approached one of the vehicles on display. It was a powerful utility truck, exactly what he needed for heavy loads and the rough roads of his farm. Before he could touch the vehicle, a young, confident salesman approached him. "Are you lost? This car isn't for everyone," he said with thinly veiled disdain. Despite the comment, Joaquim remained calm. "I'm not lost, son. I want to learn more about this truck here. It looks perfect for what I need on the farm." Joaquim's polite and composed tone contrasted with the salesman's sarcasm, who looked him up and down before responding. "This is one of our most expensive models. Maybe something simpler would suit you better. I could suggest a visit to the used car lot around the corner." The discomfort in the air was palpable. Other customers drawn by the scene began murmuring among themselves as Joaquim tried to maintain his dignity. "I appreciate the suggestion, but I'd like information about this model. I can afford what I need," he insisted, without raising his voice. The salesman sighed, clearly impatient. "Fine, but I'll need financial proof before we proceed. We wouldn't want to waste time." He handed Joaquim a card dismissively and turned to assist another customer, ignoring Joaquim entirely. The farmer stood there for a moment, processing the humiliation he had just endured. The curious and judgmental stares around him seemed to weigh heavily. But Joaquim wasn't a man who gave up easily. He picked up his briefcase, walked to the reception desk, and asked to speak with the manager. "It's about an important purchase," he said firmly. The receptionist hesitated but eventually called the person in charge. A few minutes later, the manager, a middle-aged man with an air of superiority shaped by years of dealing with wealthy clients, arrived. "How can I help you?" he asked, visibly skeptical. Joaquim opened his briefcase and placed a series of documents on the counter. They were proof of his savings and ownership of his farmland. Without saying a word, he also laid down a signed check for an amount that was more than enough to pay for the truck in full. The manager looked at the papers, then at Joaquim, surprised and a little embarrassed. Before he could respond, the young salesman who had treated Joaquim poorly earlier approached, noticing that something was happening. "Is he causing trouble?" he asked, but upon seeing the documents, his smirk vanished. "No, he's not," the manager replied in a controlled tone. He turned to Joaquim with a mix of respect and discomfort. "You're right, sir. We can proceed with the purchase. I apologize if anyone here treated you poorly. It was a misunderstanding." Joaquim nodded, maintaining his composure. "I only want what's fair. I work hard to earn what I need, and I deserve to be treated with respect, like any other customer." The next moments were tense in the showroom. While the purchase was finalized, the silence was broken only by the sound of typing and the shuffling of papers. Everyone was aware of what had happened, and the atmosphere had shifted completely. When Joaquim left the dealership a few hours later, he was no longer driving the same vehicle he had arrived in. Now, he was behind the wheel of a brand new utility truck, his discreet smile reflecting the satisfaction of someone who knew their worth. He left behind the humiliation, but not before giving the salesman a final look that said everything without needing words. Even so, there was more to this story than just buying a car. Joaquim carried something within himself, a secret that would soon leave everyone around him stunned. After leaving the dealership, Joaquim headed toward the open road, the engine of his new truck roaring with power as he drove away from the city. The sense of triumph was undeniable, but something in his expression suggested that this achievement carried more significance than it appeared. Joaquim wasn't heading straight home. He had one last stop to make before returning to the farm. That day marked the beginning of something much bigger than he had let on. As he drove, flashes of his life played in his mind. He remembered the years of sacrifice, the days spent under the relentless sun caring for the land, and the nights calculating under the dim glow of a lamp, figuring out how to save enough to support his family and perhaps fulfill that dream. This wasn't just about a new vehicle. It was a tool to transform the future. The scenery around him began to change. From the bustling city center, he now traveled a road leading to a humbler district, where small, worn-out houses stood in stark contrast to the luxurious buildings he had just left behind. Joaquim parked in front of a small mechanic's workshop, its peeling paint a testament to the passing of time and the challenges faced within. A rusted sign read Carlos's workshop, and Joaquim stepped out of the truck, carrying a quiet smile. Inside, Carlos, a man in his 40s with a grease-stained face and a tattered jumpsuit, was bent over the engine of an old car. He straightened up when he heard the door creak open. "Joaquim, you made it!" he exclaimed, wiping his hands on a rag that was as dirty as his clothes. "I made it, Carlos, and I brought you something I promised." Joaquim held out the keys to the new vehicle, causing Carlos's eyes to widen in shock. "What?" "No, that's crazy, Joaquim. I can't accept something like this," Carlos said, shaking his head vigorously. He stepped back, as though shielding himself from something too overwhelming. "This is for you, Carlos. I made a promise. You've taken care of me, my old truck, and more importantly, my family when I needed it most. This is my way of paying you back." Carlos's expression shifted to a mix of shock and deep emotion. He glanced at the gleaming vehicle parked outside, and then back at Joaquim, unsure of what to say. "But why, Joaquim? Why would you do this? You worked hard to buy that truck." Joaquim took a deep breath before answering. "Because you did more for me and my family than anyone else would have. When my wife fell ill and I couldn't afford her treatment, you lent me what you could, without hesitation. When my son needed work, you gave him a job here, even though you didn't have much to spare. You weren't just a friend, Carlos, you were like a brother." Carlos was visibly moved but still hesitant. "I only did what anyone would have done, Joaquim. This isn't necessary, it's too much." "Maybe for you it is, but for me it's not. You don't understand how much your help meant to us. Now it's my turn to help you. This truck will let you expand your workshop, get parts, serve more customers. It's not just a gift, it's an investment in your life, in your children's future." Carlos looked at the keys again, then at Joaquim, and finally smiled, his eyes brimming with tears. "I don't know how to thank you, Joaquim. I don't even know what to say." "You don't need to say anything, Carlos. Just promise me you'll put this truck to good use, and take care of it as well as you've taken care of me and my family." The two men embraced, a heartfelt gesture of friendship and gratitude that seemed to encapsulate years of shared stories. Outside, the brand new truck gleamed even brighter in the midday sun, a symbol of hope for that forgotten little neighborhood. As Joaquim said his goodbyes and climbed back into his old truck, now repaired and revitalized thanks to Carlos's insistence, he felt the weight on his shoulders lift. There was still work to be done, but this was the first step in a greater journey. With the engine rumbling, he headed back home, this time with a lighter heart. The farmer knew his story didn't end there. In fact, it was only just beginning. After leaving the dealership, Joaquim drove toward the open road, the engine of his new truck roaring with power as he left the city behind. The sense of victory was undeniable, but something in his expression, revealed that this achievement carried a deeper weight. Joaquim wasn't heading straight home. He had one more stop to make before returning to the farm. That day, after all, marked the beginning of something far greater than he had let on. As he drove, flashes of his life played in his mind. He remembered the years of sacrifice, the days under the relentless sun, caring for the land, and the nights spent crunching numbers by the dim light of an old lamp, trying to stretch his savings enough to support his family, and maybe, just maybe, achieve that dream. It wasn't just a new vehicle, it was a tool to change the future. The scenery around him began to shift. From the busy urban center, he now drove along a road leading to a humbler district, where small, worn-down houses stood in stark contrast to the luxury buildings he had just left behind. Joaquim parked in front of a small mechanic's shop, its peeling paint and rusty sign a testament to years of wear and tear. The sign read Carlos's workshop, and Joaquim stepped out of the truck, carrying with him a quiet smile. Inside, Carlos, a man in his 40s with grease-stained hands and a worn-out jumpsuit, was bent over the engine of an old car. He straightened up when he heard the sound of the door. "Joaquim, you made it!" he exclaimed, wiping his hands on a rag that was as dirty as his overalls. "I made it, Carlos, and I brought you what I promised," Joaquim said, handing over the keys to the brand-new truck, causing Carlos's eyes to widen in disbelief. "What? No, Joaquim, this is absurd. I can't accept something like this," Carlos protested, shaking his head as if trying to ward off the overwhelming gesture. "It's for you, Carlos. I promised. You've looked out for me, for my old truck, and most importantly, for my family when I needed it most. This is my way of giving back." Carlos's face shifted to a mix of shock and emotion. He glanced at the shiny new truck outside, then back at Joaquim, struggling to find words. "But why, Joaquim? Why would you do this? You worked so hard to buy that truck." Joaquim took a deep breath before answering. "Because you did more for me and my family than anyone else ever would. When my wife was sick and I didn't have money for treatment, you lent what you could without asking for anything in return. When my son needed work, you gave him a job here even though you could barely afford to pay him. You were more than a friend, Carlos. You were a brother." Carlos was visibly moved but still hesitant. "I only did what anyone else would have done, Joaquim. You didn't have to do this. It's too much. It's too much. Maybe it feels that way to you, but to me it's not. You don't understand how much your help meant to us. Now it's my turn to help you. This truck will let you grow your business, pick up parts, and serve more clients. It's not just a gift, it's an investment in your future." Carlos stared at the keys again, then at Joaquim before finally smiling through tear-filled eyes. "I don't know how to thank you, Joaquim. I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, Carlos. Just promise me you'll put it to good use and take care of that truck as well as you took care of me and my family." The two men embraced, a heartfelt gesture of friendship and gratitude that seemed to sum up years of shared history. Outside, the new vehicle gleamed even brighter under the midday sun, a symbol of hope for that overlooked little district. As Joaquim bid farewell and climbed back into his old truck, which Carlos had insisted on fixing and returning to him, now fully restored, he felt a weight lifted from his shoulders. There was still work to be done, but this was the first step of a much larger journey. With the engine humming, he made his way back home, this time with a lighter heart. The farmer knew his story wouldn't end there. In fact, it was just beginning. The sun was setting when Joaquim finally saw the entrance to his farm. The small wooden gate creaked in the breeze, and the faded sign that read Boa Esperanza Farm showed the toll time had taken. To many, the place might have seemed modest, even insignificant, but to Joaquim, it was the result of generations of hard work and the foundation of everything he had in life. As he stepped out of his truck, he was greeted by the excited barks of Trovão, the family's old dog. Joaquim patted the animal affectionately before heading inside the house. There he found his son, Mateus, sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by school books and scribbled notebooks. At 16, Mateus was a hard-working boy whose eyes sparkled with the dreams of someone aiming high, despite the hardships of rural life. "How was the trip to the city, Dad?" Mateus asked, closing one of his notebooks to focus on his father. "It went well, son. I took care of some important matters and even managed to help a friend. How was your day? Joaquim replied, sitting at the table while observing the boy's expression shift slightly. It was fine. I finished up with the cows and spent the rest of the time studying. But Dad, is it true you went to buy a new truck? People in town were talking about it when I went to the market last week. They said you were spending a fortune. Joaquim smiled faintly. Sometimes people worry more about other folks' money than their own lives, don't they? But I didn't buy that truck to show off, Matthias, you know that. We need something reliable for transport. Our old truck can't take much more. Matthias nodded, understanding his father's reasoning but still curious. He knew Joaquim always had a deeper motive behind his actions. Before he could ask more questions, the door opened and Teresa, Joaquim's wife, entered the kitchen with a tired yet warm smile. Joaquim, I'm glad you're back. I was starting to worry, she said, adjusting the scarf around her graying hair as she sat beside him. Teresa was a strong woman, but years of farm work and a tough battle against an illness that had almost taken her life had left visible marks on her health. I'm here, safe and sound, and I've got news, Joaquim said, gently holding her hand. She could already sense there was more to his story, and her inquisitive eyes urged him to continue. What kind of news? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Joaquim smiled but kept his answer brief. You'll find out tomorrow morning. For now, let's enjoy dinner together as a family. Though their curiosity grew, Teresa and Matthias respected Joaquim's decision to remain silent. They knew he wasn't a man of rash decisions, and that when the time was right, he would reveal what he was planning. That night, the family shared a lively dinner. Matthias recounted humorous stories of his attempts to get the cows to obey him, and Teresa chuckled softly, momentarily forgetting the worries that always lingered. Joaquim listened quietly, wearing a serene smile, basking in the warmth of their simple but precious togetherness. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, Joaquim remained on the porch staring at the stars. In his hands was a crumpled envelope containing papers that had changed his life months earlier. They were documents confirming an offer from a major conglomerate interested in purchasing a portion of his land. It wasn't just any offer, it was substantial, enough to transform his family's life. But Joaquim wasn't one to make hasty decisions. He knew that accepting the offer meant much more than money. The land was all he had ever known, a legacy left by his parents, and something he had always believed he would pass on to Matthias. Yet, he couldn't ignore the opportunity to give his son a better life, one free from the hardships of rural toil. As the hours passed, Joaquim's thoughts swirled, and by the time sleep finally overtook him, he had made a decision. But, as always, he would wait for the right moment to share it. The sun was still low on the horizon when Joaquim started the old truck, with Teresa and Matthias sitting beside him. Both were visibly curious, eager to uncover the mystery behind this unexpected trip. Joaquim had not revealed their destination, saying only that it was important for the family. He drove with his usual calm demeanor, but his eyes held a gleam of anticipation. Matthias, unable to hold back his curiosity, broke the silence. Dad, where are we going? You've been so secretive, it's getting hard to wait. Teresa also glanced at her husband, her expression a mix of intrigue and quiet patience. Joaquim chuckled softly. Just a little more patience, son. You'll understand everything when we get there. The dirt road stretched ahead of them, flanked by fields that seemed to go on forever. Matthias eventually recognized the route and furrowed his brow. We're heading toward that land you almost sold last year, aren't we? Joaquim smiled faintly, but didn't answer directly. He kept his focus on the road while Teresa's watchful eyes followed every turn with growing curiosity. After a few more minutes, Joaquim parked at the entrance to a large piece of land, marked by a wire fence and an improvised gate that stood open. Beyond it lay a wide expanse of untouched fields. We're here, Joaquim said as he climbed out of the truck, motioning for the others to join him. Matthias and Teresa followed, taking in the quiet beauty of the land around them. The silence was broken only by the sound of the wind and the occasional chirping of birds. Matthias looked around, puzzled. Dad, this land belongs to us, right? What's so special about it? Joaquim walked into the middle of the field, taking a deep breath before turning to face his family. Yes, it's ours. And that's exactly what I want to talk to you about. He paused, his voice steady but filled with emotion. For years, this land hasn't been used to its full potential. It's fertile but remote and hard to access. I've thought many times about selling it to someone who could make better use of it. Teresa, who had remained quiet until now, finally spoke. But you never did, Joachim. You always said you wanted to leave this land for Mateus. Joachim nodded thoughtfully. That's true, Teresa, but things have changed. Recently, I received a proposal from a major agricultural group. They want to buy this land to expand their operations. The amount they're offering is more than fair. Matthias's eyes widened in surprise. Are you going to sell it? I thought you never would. Joachim raised a hand, signaling for calm. I haven't made a final decision yet, Matthias, but I need you both to understand what this could mean. With that money, we could invest in our family's future. You could attend the best university. Teresa could get the medical care she deserves without us worrying about the cost, and we could improve our farm, bringing in new technology to make life easier for everyone in the community. The weight of his words hung in the air. Teresa appeared torn, while Matthias looked at his father with both admiration and doubt. But Dad, what about the land? This is part of our history. If we sell it, won't we be leaving something important behind? Joachim placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his gaze firm yet kind. It's a tough decision, son, but what's more important, the land itself or the opportunities it can create for us? This land has always been here to serve our family, and now maybe the best way it can serve us is by helping us move forward. Matthias fell silent, processing his father's words. Teresa, too, stepped closer to Joachim and held his hand. You've always done what's best for us, Joachim. I trust you to make the right choice. Joachim took a deep breath, looking out over the horizon. We still have time to decide, but I wanted you to see this land one more time because no matter what happens, it will always be part of our story. After the visit, the family returned home. During the drive back, Matthias was lost in thought, while Teresa exchanged meaningful glances with Joachim. When they arrived, they were met with an unexpected surprise. Carlos, the mechanic, was waiting for them by the porch with the new utility truck. He smiled broadly and held up the keys. Joachim, I brought back your old truck, all fixed up and running like new, and I wanted to return this. Joachim frowned slightly. Carlos, the truck is yours. I told you that already. Carlos shook his head firmly. And I told you I can't accept such a big gift without giving something back. So here's my offer. I'll use the truck to improve my business and help others, but whenever you need it, it's yours to use. Joachim laughed, shaking his friend's hand. Deal, Carlos, but only because you insisted. That afternoon, they shared stories, laughter, and dreams. Joachim knew that the future was uncertain, but with his family's unity and the support of his friends, he felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. Quietly, he prepared the ground, not just for crops, but for the new possibilities the future promised. In the days that followed, Joachim seemed more contemplative than usual. Between the chores on the farm and conversations with Teresa and Matthias, he weighed the possibilities that selling the land could bring. The proposal wasn't just an opportunity, it was a crossroads, a chance to change everything. But with it came doubt and a heavy weight on his heart. Teresa, always perceptive, decided to approach him one evening as he sat on the porch staring at the stars. Joachim, what's really troubling you? It's not just the sale of the land, is it? He looked at her and gently took her hand. It's hard, Teresa. This land isn't just a piece of property. It's what connects us to our past, to our family's story. But at the same time, I think about what this could mean for our future. Matthias deserves a chance to study and have a life that's different. You deserve rest and care, and me, I'm not sure I'm ready to let go of something so significant. Teresa sighed, squeezing his hand softly. You've always carried the weight of this family, Joachim. You've always put us first, but you don't have to make this decision alone. We're here with you. Whatever you decide, we'll stand by you. The next day, Joachim decided it was time to seek counsel. He called Matthias and took him to a special place, the small barn at the back of the property, where old tools, worn-out equipment, and precious memories were stored. At the center was an aged wooden table, its surface scarred by time and use. "Matthias, do you know why I brought you here?" Joachim asked as the boy looked around at the familiar, yet suddenly more meaningful space. "No, Dad. But I imagine it's important," Matthias replied, trying to read his father's expression. Joachim pulled out an old chair and sat down, gesturing for Matthias to do the same. "This is where your grandfather and I spent much of our days. He taught me everything I know about this land, how to care for it and how it takes care of us. I learned through hard work that the land only bears fruit when we treat it with respect. That's what I've tried to teach you." Matthias listened silently, absorbing every word. "And that's why you're struggling with selling the land, isn't it?" Joachim smiled, proud of his son's insight. "Exactly. It's not just about the money. It's about what this decision means. If I sell, we'll have the resources to invest in your future, in our family. But it also means letting go of something that's been part of who we are." Matthias lowered his gaze, deep in thought, before looking back at his father. "Dad, I understand what you're saying, but in a way I think you've already answered your own question. You've always said the land takes care of us when we take care of it. Maybe this time, the best way for the land to take care of us is by letting us move forward." Joachim felt a tightness in his chest. The maturity in Matthias's words deeply moved him. He knew the boy was right. As painful as it was, perhaps the time for change had truly come. By the end of that week, Joachim arranged a meeting with the representative of the agricultural conglomerate interested in the land. The man, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, arrived in a gleaming truck. Joachim, Teresa, and Matthias waited for him on the porch, attentively listening as the representative laid out the terms of the agreement. "The offer remains the same, Mr. Joachim. It's an excellent deal, and we assure you we'll preserve the land's characteristics as we develop our operations," the representative explained in a polished, confident tone. Joachim listened carefully, weighing every detail. Though he wasn't a man of formal education, he understood the value of each line in the contract. Finally, he looked at Teresa, who nodded with an encouraging smile. Then he turned to Matthias, who gave a firm nod of support. "I accept," Joachim said, signing the document with a steady hand that masked the whirlwind of emotions within him. The representative shook Joachim's hand enthusiastically, expressing gratitude for his trust. As the man departed, Joachim remained on the porch, gazing at the horizon with a mixture of relief and wistfulness. "Dad, are you okay?" Matthias asked, concerned by his father's silence. Joachim took a deep breath before responding. "I'm fine, son. Just saying goodbye. This land has been good to us, but now it's time to move forward." In the months that followed, changes began to take shape. With the money from the sale, Joachim renovated their home, invested in the farm, and ensured Matthias had access to a quality education. Teresa started receiving medical treatments that significantly improved her health, and even the old barn got a new lease on life, becoming a space for community gatherings. But the biggest change was in the bond between Joachim and his family. He discovered that despite letting go of the land, he had never lost what truly mattered: love, respect, and the commitment to those who were his true legacy. Even with all the changes, Joachim remained the same humble and resilient man, and every night, as he gazed at the stars from his porch, he knew he had made the right choice. Months after selling the land, Joachim and his family had settled into a new rhythm. The farm now operated more efficiently, thanks to new equipment. Teresa's health had improved remarkably with better medical care, and Matthias was thriving as he prepared for college. He had set his sights on studying agricultural engineering, eager to modernize the family's legacy while honoring its roots. Though life had improved, Joachim still carried a quiet longing for the land he had given up. He knew he had made the right choice, but the emotional weight of letting go lingered. Often he would sit in the refurbished barn, reflecting on the memories that remained etched in his heart. One late afternoon, as Joachim relaxed on the porch, Matthias approached him, holding an envelope. "Dad, this came in today. It looks important." Joachim took the envelope, examining the sender's name. It was from the agricultural conglomerate that had purchased the land. Curious, he opened it to find a formal letter, thanking him for his trust and informing him that work on the property had begun. but at the bottom of the page was a handwritten note that caught his attention. Mr. Joachim, during our work on the land, we found something that we believe belongs to your family. We'll deliver it to your farm tomorrow. Respectfully, Eduardo Leal, Regional Manager. Joachim was puzzled. What could they have found? He shared the news with Teresa and Mateus, and the three spent the evening speculating. Yet none of their guesses could have prepared them for what awaited. Early the next morning, a truck from the company arrived at the farm. A staff member stepped out carrying a carefully wrapped wooden box. Joachim thanked him and brought the box inside, his hands steady, but his heart racing with anticipation. As he opened the lid, he found objects that immediately transported him back to his childhood. Inside was an album of old photographs showing his family working on the land decades earlier. One photo depicted a young Joachim standing proudly beside his father and grandfather, all smiling in front of a bountiful harvest. There was also an aged notebook filled with handwritten notes by Joachim's father, detailing the challenges and triumphs of their farming days. But what drew Joachim's attention most was a simple silver medallion. Though worn, it carried a timeless quality. Joachim's breath caught as he lifted it. "This belonged to my grandfather," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "He used to say it brought our family luck." Teresa and Mateus watched as Joachim held the medallion, reverently turning it over in his hands. "I thought this was lost years ago. I can't believe it was buried there all along." Mateus, curious, asked, "Dad, what does this mean to you?" Joachim smiled, looking at his son with misty eyes. "It means that even when we think we're saying goodbye to something, the things that truly matter never leave us. That land was part of our story, and now with these memories it always will be." In the weeks that followed, Joachim found a new purpose for the recovered items. He transformed the renovated barn into a small rural museum. Inside, he displayed the photographs, the notebook, and the medallion, along with tools and artifacts from their farming past. The museum became a gathering place for the community, a space where stories were shared and traditions were preserved for the next generation. Inspired by his family's history, Matthias decided that his future wouldn't lie solely in the city. While pursuing his degree in agricultural engineering, he began applying his knowledge to further modernize the farm, blending innovation with the values passed down through generations. As for Joachim, he remained the heart of the family, guiding them with quiet wisdom and unshakable love. Every evening as he sat on the porch gazing at the stars, the medallion in his pocket, he knew that despite all the changes, he was exactly where he was meant to be. And so, the farmer who once walked into a luxury car dealership and was humiliated had transformed his life and the lives of those around him. He proved that a person's true value isn't in what they own, but in the legacy of kindness, love, and resilience they leave behind.